This is going to be a casual overview of my experience of this illness and wisdom gathered along the way. I need to obviously make it clear that this isn't medical advice. This is definitely experiential advice about the true underpinnings and the path that I've found and that I've witnessed other people have found a way to get through. So we immediately come into the body, and I think because we've just pressed play and we've taken action on something, it may be that this is a really good example of using this time to go into the body right now. You've just pressed play. What are the changes in the body? So often, when we undertake a new course or something like that, the brain is spiking a stress response. There's an awful lot of pressure to succeed. Are you going to understand the information? Is it good information? I'm sure there's been so many red flags along the way with, people who offer bad information, not getting the help you need. It's such an emotional roller coaster. And so taking a chance and watching a video on something, it's going to spike something in the brain. And so this is a great time to sort of learn about the mind body and go into those sensations, which you may be aware of. I certainly wasn't aware of what was happening in my body. I was living in a very sort of cerebral monkey mind of just thoughts and basically below and ignoring anything below the neck. So breathing. Let's notice our breathing patterns. Let's see if it feels tight. Our shoulders, our muscular system, roll your shoulders, look at your jaw. Is that feeling tight? That area is massively associated with ME and the cranial nerves and the brain stem. Is your mind running? Is there a sort of inner vibration? That would be a symptom of being more in a fight or flight response. Are your limbs burning? I mean, what's going on? And we crucially, meld the mind and the body by describing what we're seeing, what we're feeling. And by doing this, sometimes symptoms can literally resolve because it's like the symptom is going, yes, I'm doing this symptom for a reason. And you finally acknowledge me by describing it. So, for example, you're breathing, you put your hand on your heart and your chest area and you just feel what's there and you stay with it. And then you would describe it. And so it would be tight, bracing, whatever, a good descriptive word. And you stay with it longer. And you can begin to maybe place an emotion with that bracing tightness. What's behind it? And this isn't something like first time round you'll get. For me, it took probably years to really allow the symptoms to start speaking. But it's really important. This is such a big step. And because you've just pressed play on something, that will cause a reaction, most likely. So I hope you've gathered, maybe take some time, press pause and gather a bit of information on what's happening in your body right now. This is going to be a casual talk really about overall theory of what happened to me, what I've learned along the way. And I've been pretty ferociously searching for patterns in other people's stories and looking for a general path. And I think there is. I mean, I obviously want to say, yes, this isn't medical advice, but this is my own experience. And so I feel absolutely confident putting out what I believe the root cause of these illnesses, these post-infection syndromes often are. And I'm just sort of grateful that there seems to be a breaking point within the healthcare system now that this information really is getting out there. When I'm talking mind body, I don't really think I need to spend too much time kind of buffering anybody who would be offended by that. There's nothing in what I'm about to say that does not completely know that this is a absolute highly physical illness. And I think people who are offended by the idea of brain training and mind-body conditions, it seems like they think I'm saying, oh, it's all in your head. If you just think differently, it won't be there. There was no part of me when I was bedbound for years, wheelchair, the fight to get my walking back, get my movement back. Like there was no part of me that was like, just think positive and this won't be happening. It's a physical devastation. It's atrocious, and it's a massively real. And I could list 100 symptoms which were real, probably very obviously physical. And so I don't need to sort of spend time saying really anything more than that. And I think people who get offended maybe don't understand enough about actually neurology and how the brain runs the show and how we have this sliver of influence over our neurology, which is our conscious mind. But I'll go into that later. I obviously also want to add that there's so much variable factors within this. Were you someone who was triggered by a chemical toxic exposure? Were you someone that was triggered by an emotional trauma? Were you someone, a viral Lyme disease, whatever it is? People with hypermobility and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, people with cranial cervical, there's a massive crossover. But time and time again, you will just see the nervous system coming back, whether it's, organophosphate exposure that loves to target the nervous system. Cranial cervical is obviously literally running down, the area where the nervous system's coming out from the brain and down into the body. It's all kind of the same. And I think something that I'm grateful for is I'm not a member of the kind of medical establishment or have any kind of links personally to it. So, I'm not worrying that I don't have the whole picture, because I know I have enough of the picture, and I know enough people who have focused on their neurology and their nervous systems. So it's kind of the same thing. Their limbic brain, their vestibular system, down-regulating this limbic response, working on rebuilding these parts of the vestibular system which have kind of gone into wildness, learning that their symptoms mainly are sort of autonomic nervous system responses that can be rewired, because that's called neuroplasticity. And, if it works for stroke victims who lose the ability to walk, it can work for you. And so I'll really leave it there. And I hope people have an open mind. And when I'm talking about stress, I'm talking about allopathic stress. And so that could be a viral stress, or that could be, a highly subtle, unconscious programming of, stress from childhood, which you've been just running your body off for years. And so it's sort of just chemical and electrical and the same. And your body isn't really going, oh, no, that's like an emotional response and that's a viral spike. It's all just stress. And yeah, the body isn't distinguishing. Obviously, if these terms, the autonomic nervous system and the limbic brain, the previous video, what is ME, post-infection syndrome? So that's the more, barely, but that's the more scientific, explanation of these terms. And I think, even if you say, oh, I don't really know about science, I don't understand it, just reading through what quite casually, quite roughly, the limbic brain is responsible, I think you'll see how beneficial that is to understand that. Because quite simply, it can be put in different ways, but that's what we need to rewire, is this limbic brain, which when I say limbic brain, I'm just meaning this kind of protection mechanism that has gone awry, and it's firing, in a faulty way, in an overprotective way. And that would be the crossover between autoimmune disease. Your immune system is overprotecting. It's somehow got the signal that it needs to constantly be in overprotection mode. And, I also just want to quickly add that for some people, bringing balance back to their limbic brain will be as simple as doing something physical, like doing a heavy metal detox, which I don't actually recommend, but straight away, certainly not. But, some people, that is how they remove that toxic stress, as a burden on the body, and their nervous system sort of figures it out from there. And so that would be a very mild case, for the people who have this, years and years and get to the level of severity that I did. There's a lot more going on. It's going to be viral. It's going to be toxic. It's going to be, deep rooted stress patterns, which are just completely unlivable, which I was operating from. But quite simply, if you could take anything away from this, we are trying to de-stress the body, and we're trying to bring this limbic system back into regular function. And so, blood sugar, I'm going to presume that everyone here is eating a sort of unprocessed food diet and not go too much into the functional medicine side, because I really, within maybe a couple of people I've heard out of the maybe thousands of stories I read now, it would be one or two people have managed to resolve this with functional medicine, and they would have been mild cases. And so I don't set that much by it. I think it's a really useful tool in the sort of last stages of of recovery, and a very useful tool for people who are maybe a little bit unhealthy, who need to get healthier. But at a foundational level, like, you have to get this nervous system stuff right, this cell danger response off, or you're literally going to be, as I certainly was at one time, going for sort of medical IVs. Perfect amount of sort of cellular energy should have been being produced by these medical IVs I was having in this doctor's surgery, and I was getting weaker and weaker, and the doctor was getting almost quite angry with me, and I was unable to sit up, and then eventually I had to stop going because I couldn't sit up anymore. I was too weak to sit up. And so, what was happening there, I now know, is my cell danger response was getting, from the muscle usage of having to sort of sit up, and blood pressure stress of having to be upright. That stress was deepening. And I like to visualize like a car brake. Your foot is on the brake, and the more stress, the brake is just pushing down and down, and the energy is getting less and less. And that's a bit of a detour story, but this idea that you can just feed your body the perfect cocktail of nutrients and amino acids, and bam, you're going to be back. We have to work on the cell danger response, which is this stress response, this foot on the brake, because the cell membrane hardens and no nutrients can even get to the cell, and no nutrients can get out of a cell equally. And that's why we get detox issues. But it's so important to realize that, just supplements and things, it's almost like the least you could do, the least you could do to recover. And so I'm going to presume that everyone is eating a broadly healthy diet. And the important thing would be the immediate kind of, obviously, don't eat toxic food, and don't spike your blood sugar, because that's a stress. So we're trying to de-stress. I think it's a good time to add that so often there are so many practitioners out there bringing so much to the table. My advice with anyone you go and see, even if it's someone who's, an acupuncturist, if possible, a functional medicine person, whoever it is, a yoga teacher even, try and find one who has been through a similar situation, a similar post-infection syndrome, Lyme disease, anything like that, who understands the mechanism of the PEM kind of doing something and then crashing. Because otherwise, actually it leads to a lot more dysregulation. I remember speaking to someone who was a nervous system expert, and I won't name the modality, but he was head of this kind of somatic modality in the country, in the UK. And I was talking to him about ME symptoms, and he was looking at me completely blankly, because they're not, and it's not his fault. He wanted to help, but they're not trained for this. And so that's why you have to find someone who knows what you're talking about. Because also it's a real confidence boost when you see someone who's come through it, but they're going to know what you're talking about. And another little small story, I remember working with someone who's meant to be a great functional medicine practitioner, And once again, she was almost getting frustrated with me. And I had to stop my sessions because I was talking and I was losing the ability to speak and I couldn't look at screens. And she was like, yeah, but how much broccoli are you eating? And I was like, okay, I'm supplementing with sulforaphane. I'm having broccoli twice a day. Like, I don't think this is a lack of broccoli. And in a strange way, at this point in my really terrible decline, I'm sort of grateful because I can see that I could have got stuck at this point within a mild pathology where you're still able to function. You're just weirdly, going for a walk and then getting flu and getting weaker, but not really knowing. And you're dizzy and you've got strange other symptoms going on to do with your immune system, and you go, okay, this might be just some sort of strange immune dysregulation, or you can get lost in the sort of the viral levels and the toxic levels and the mercury and the mold, and you can get sort of lost in that sort of functional medicine hole. And so in a strange way, when I think this story might be in the first talk I gave, but I remember I was lying in bed and a feather duvet covering my feet, and I'm getting weird sort of pulsing things happening, coming from my brain, numb, half my face is going numb, and it feels quite literally like a Stonehenge sort of megalith stone is crushing down on my toes. I mean, unbelievable agony, because the duvet is registering as very heavy. And so then I was like, okay, this is neurological. And then from that moment on, I really stopped focusing, because I learned about the autonomic nervous system and the nerve, from my very basic understanding of like, okay, it's nerves, they're sending signals back to the brain that this is really heavy. I then learned about the autonomic nervous system and the limbic brain, and and then later the vestibular system, and how, okay, that these are the answers. It's not like, okay, we need to just do this with your immune system and take this to kill off this bacteria in your gut. And it sort of elevated me above going, oh no, this is actually what's running all of the other stuff. And when I see people who are still stuck on that sort of functional medicine route, I'm just like, it certainly can be a boost and a support, but it's like having a carer. It's just a nice support. It's not in my experience and in most other people's experience, like a path out of this. So from what I learnt about neuroplasticity, I was like, right, these are brain signals and they're acting in a faulty way. I knew I'd heard the term neuroplasticity. The brain can change. You can, reshape and create new signals, alternative signals. And I knew there wasn't like damage. It's not like there had been physical damage to the nerves, although I think there's some sort of chronic inflammation in some people I have read medically. But I then completely just went down the brain route and learned about brain training. So the new slide, brain training. I think I just want to say at first, my experience was 4 different courses, and I got worse after each one. So in a way, I'm the worst and I'm the best person to talk to brain training about, because I know exactly what I was doing wrong. And what I was doing wrong was bringing my old personality, my stress personality, into trying to sort of master a technique, bringing a lot of insecurity. Do I understand the science? Am I getting it right? And I really didn't like all the different letters meaning something, all the different sort of, I guess, trademarked programs. Found it quite, looking back, it was massively overwhelming. And I was bringing my personality to it, which was a very achiever personality, and someone who doesn't want to start something until they know for sure that they can do it and it's going to be okay. That's all on reflection. But at the time, I look back, I was like, I should have just actually done it. I didn't really do it. I kind of thought about it constantly, but I wasn't really doing the work, the actual training. And so I really think there's a lot of sort of mystique and build up around these courses because they're so expensive. You almost think it's more than it actually is, but it really is very simple. Brain training is, as I've said before, is using this sliver of control that we have over our neurology within our, neurology, our conscious brain to build and light up a positive mind body state. And so that's literally all we're doing. Don't overcomplicate it. In simple terms, emotions are just neuropeptides. And if we can shut our eyes and build a world from memory where we can flood our body and our brain with all the good stuff, calm, peace, love, a thought is not just an abstract thing. It is, as I said, an emotion is a neuropeptide, and it is shaping how your physiology is playing out. So what we're doing with brain training is we are using our conscious brain to create, and I quite literally see them as like maps, like a new map, a new pathway, which will bring our brain and body into a homeostasis kind of recovery nervous system state. So the thing about brain training is this isn't just it's not, as I said, it's not just like, oh, just have a positive thought and it'll be fine. This is really getting to the core and making it, as I said, like a positive mind body state again and again and again. And you have, I don't know how they quite know this, 66,000 thoughts a day. And so we need to be, working on those. Obviously I don't think you can do this work 66,000 times a day, but we need to be like every 10 minutes going into one of these states and learning what's really getting us into a state. Just going, okay, I'm on a beach, that's not going to really cut it. But actually doing this work, as I'll go on to explain later, you can really learn like what, where, who is actually creating, shifts in your body. Okay, so as I say here, interrupt. That's like step one. And I'm hoping I'm just going to demystify this because these, thousands of pounds on a course, like it's really, really simple. You're interrupting. So firstly, that means you have to be conscious of something. But once you are, you interrupt it. And then for successful brain training, go into some somatic info in the body like we did at the start. We kind of scan our body and get as much information about what's really happening, ideally on an emotional level, by naming the sensation. And then we create something new. So as I said, like Google neural pathways and see them, two neurons making a pathway, and that will give you a kind of visualization of we're trying to create a new way of functioning. So when I say create something new, what do I actually mean by that? It could, traditionally it's a visualization. It could be putting on a piece of music that you love, that your body responds to very positively. That is creating something new. It's an elevation. And, neuroplasticity needs strength. It needs, a very elevated strength behind it. And it needs an insane amount of repetition. And so, as an example, when I was learning how to walk again and how to get this strange, reaction I had when I would use my muscles, we're talking 6 hours a day. We're talking, lying flat before I did the walk, while I'm doing the walk, for hours after I did the walk, because the way the brain strangely works is, it knows you've just used your muscles and it is so determined to shut you down and shut you down on such an intense cellular level. It believes it's doing the best for you. I really believe, I sometimes, use the wrong language and use the word like fight, but actually, your body is actually fighting for you, but just in the wrong direction. It truly is doing its best for you. It's shutting you down because it believes that's the best course of action. It's tried everything else and now it just wants to shut down. And that can sound quite depressing because you look back at your previous life and how I was living it. And that this is with no, I don't blame myself at all. I believe I had to go through this, but it's so fascinating that that was the next course of action. Complete, flat on your back for years, not able to speak, not able to walk. That's the best course of action for you. Your body is always working for what it believes is your benefit. And, making peace with that and, trying to wrap your head around that is a big one. But I would be again and again, because this brain, even after I'd used my muscles, and maybe, I don't know, it's the lactic acid. This is what I don't know. This is the kind of question mark area. But I know after any movement, even when I'm back lying flat, my body is wanting to completely do the trigger the ME and shut down completely and go into the full crash. And so I'm working the whole time on this elevation. And I'll get to more of probably why it was harder for me than most. But that would be a kind of example, a practical example of how it took me to fully get back my walking. And by the way, it can happen very quickly. Some people are within 3 months, which is the sort of like broadly accepted time frame for developing new sturdy neural pathways. Is about 3 months. For some people, they're back on their feet so fast. For me, it really has, we're talking years and years. I think when brain training is unhelpful is when, quite literally, if you imagine your limbic brain like a child, like a young child, and it's producing a chemical electrical signal that's creating a symptom, and you're going no, and a thought, and you're going no, wrong, create something new. I think at the start it's useful when you're retraining things like light and noise and just being able to sit up. I actually think, going quite hard and just again and again and again with the kind of interrupt, create something new, interrupt, create something new, you'll get, I hope, results quite fast and an improvement. I think for the later stage within, if we even call it brain training, it really needs to be much more of a kind of somatic world building exercise where you're not just saying, no, that's wrong. Because actually, how triggering is that? Maybe it's actually, time to just stop and stay in the sensation and see it through and sort of complete it. Because I'm slightly getting off topic, but I also noticed with the polyvagal, which I talk about in an earlier talk, but the polyvagal system is, it's a ladder. They call it a ladder, but I sort of see it as like waves. And with this illness, it's like we're not completing the full cycle and we're getting stuck and frozen. And so actually staying with a sensation, a symptom, and just sitting with it, crucially, not in a sort of fear-driven, angry way. If there's fear and there's anger, you feel it, but you don't just stay stuck in it. You kind of talk to it like a child, and maybe it's not time to create something new with the brain training. Maybe it's time just to sit with it and see if it, like a wave, it can sort of break and come out of it itself. But that's more of the kind of somatic work, which I think is really essential. So what did I mean when I said you must make it a somatic sort of world building experience? At the very least, it will really help you figure out a lot more. And this is something which you may not understand until you really start doing it. But let's say we're putting together a visualization. And let's say that visualization, you suddenly want to introduce a person into it. And that person comes in and you go, no, actually, I'm checking back in my body and I'm not feeling that's actually making my breathing a bit tighter. Okay, well, now let's, almost like you're cooking, let's try a different ingredient. Can we jump to this location and this time from memory? And okay, nothing from memory is working. Let's create something completely new in the future. You'll sort of learn by playing around, like you're cooking with different ingredients, what is actually creating shifts within your body and within your system. Because with that hypersensitized, we feel everything, as well as these very expensive brain training programs. Something like faster EFT and Psyche. These are all brain training programs. It's such a broad term. And so you need, I would say, a couple of different techniques in your toolkit to move forward. So quite simply, we're going to assemble a toolkit for yourself, and that will include some sort of brain training, some limbic down regulation. It will include breath work. It will include vestibular eye exercises, which I'll talk at length another time. It will include, for me, maybe there's 10 things I know that I can use together and kind of intuitively, and I can get a shift neurologically, which will then shift my the sensations and my symptoms in my body. And as I've talked in my class for carers, the broad idea is you put your toolkit together, and that may mean that you actually have to sort of push to get the information. If you're at a severe level, to actually watch this video, for example, is a massive challenge for someone if they're severe. If they're mild, you can put your toolkit together quite simply. And then you're going to get used to using it and feeling it and be confident that you can use these tools and feel shifts. Then you will hopefully stabilize, and you'll be at a level where I just would live at that stable place for a while. And the whole time, our brain is always looking for danger, always looking for trouble. You're just reassuring it the whole time. No, look, we're stable now. Look at this, reassure again and again. And then we're going to start to go out into the world. To whatever degree that you're ill, it's going to look so different for different people. But we're now going to go out with our toolkit and be triggered quite literally and get symptoms. And then we're going to use the toolkit, and we are going to, over time, change the signals, change what's happening in our body, and we're probably going to crash. And learning how to sort of be okay with that and know that, okay, well, it used to be a month and now maybe it's a week. And okay, maybe it's a week, this time round, but next time I know what happened. We're going to go again, and maybe it's just a day. And eventually the severity of everything will, down regulate and down and not sort of be where it was. And it's a very tricky thing because there's not a time frame, and you're having to go out into discomfort and know that, quite honestly, it's going to be really challenging because we're so hardwired already with the fear of what's happened to us. And so we're choosing to go back out, and we know there's going to be probably symptoms, but we just have to keep going. And you have to know that with this work, it will slowly fall away. For me, that might have looked like the first time I went out, to a shop by myself. You make sure you park as close to the shop as possible. You just go in, buy one thing, earplugs on, ear defenders on, whatever you need, and you get back and you did it. And maybe there'll be ramifications for that, but eventually it will become more challenging. You'll have to stand and queue, and you only have a couple of minutes of leg strength. But it's really crazy what you have to put yourself through and manage the fear level, have confidence and support around you. And that's such a big thing. Having, that for me was a big, gaping hole, was not having the appropriate support. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But It might look like the first time I had a friend who would drive me to a next door village and having to be upright, and the vibration of the car, the sensory of sitting in the car. And, I'd get home and that was a week in bed from just sitting in silence with ear defenders on, driving for 10 minutes. But I knew as soon as he was available again, I'd be like, let's try, we have to do that again. And we did it again. And it gets easier and easier, and the symptoms get less and less. And for someone with severe ME or moderate ME, it is going to be rewiring function at a level that you're not really even quite aware of. I mean, it's muscles, it's movement, it's breath, it's digestion, you're rewiring everything. And yeah, it takes a lot of time. But one thing I know for sure is if you try and wait this illness out, you'll be waiting forever, because the neuroplasticity has to come from exposure. And so it's interesting, I mentioned this in the carer talk, but so often the people around us, they don't want us to be suffering, they don't want us to crash. And that's quite simple, they don't want us to be back bedbound, but we have to go into the exposure. And so managing your own fear, you need to be really strict on them, but they need to be like, yes, you can do this. It doesn't matter if it doesn't, you're going to get symptoms. It doesn't matter. You're supported, but they have to understand this exposure. This is how the brain changes via the exposure. You can't just keep yourself safe in your house forever, or nothing will change. So don't make the mistake that I did, which was a very toolkit heavy recovery. I was, I'm tapping, I'm brain training, I'm, stimulating my vagus nerve with an electrical device. It was very much like the tools, and missing such a big part of just human life. And such a massive part of anyone's recovery is their environment. And I made it a very sort of sterile neuroplastic journey. I was living alone. I had a carer who would come once a day. But, as I said, yeah, you could stimulate your vagus nerve to the end of time, but, a kind of whole recovery comes from quite literally that, like a return to wholeness and a return to unconditional love for yourself, connection with others, and really moving towards a life that you actually want to be living. Which sounds quite obvious, but if you're, everything's just like a challenge, and which I very much made it into, like regaining function was like this big challenge, almost like training for a marathon or something. But they were like, where's the fun? Where's the life you actually want to be living? And so to whatever degree that's possible, start living that life, even if that means, okay, can I speak to my friend for 1 minute? And I think that's like very hard to explain to people if they haven't really come on the journey with you. Like, I really want to speak to you, but I know that I need certain things in place to manage that. Maybe it's you need to stop all the sort of ambient noise around you, or as I said, maybe it can literally only be really a kind of couple of minute conversation. That would help you. And I think for me, there was a lack of confidence to ask for what I needed from others. And it's something, that I've had to sort of look into a bit. But you must ask for help, and you must ask, even if people are going to think you're strange for saying, why can you only talk for 1 minute? Because they don't understand, the neurological agony of the overstimulation in the brain. And you must ask for that if you know that that's going to help you, because you're moving towards that friendship and being connected with someone. You must go for it, and you must sort of almost be much more demanding. You need to really examine your environment. Is there trust? Is there sort of unconditional love? Can you move away from anyone who doesn't have that for you? And if people, maybe you don't feel it, but you think it's there, like how can you show your brain and your body that you're safer amongst the people in your life? It's about asking for unmet needs to be, met. And keeping a diary of that is really useful. Jotting down when symptoms happen, examine what was just playing out. It's such an extreme level of hypervigilance that your brain's working at. We just have to understand that was probably happening before we got ill too. And so really like journaling and examining, like, yes, right now your hypervigilance is to light, to noise, to seeing these things as your brain is reading things as threats. But most likely that would have been a pattern, a much very subtle unconscious pattern before you got ill. I would say things to look out for: draining energy from relationships, look into that. Was it a life of lack? Where did you perceive the lack? Were you always pushing? Was there perfectionism? This high achieving, never enough side of you, low self-esteem, quite performative relationships, which are, very inauthentic, but also very clever because they're, really signaling success within the tribe. If you can be what the other person wants you to be, then you're safe at a sort of very sort of tribal level within your group of people that are essential for your survival. At this point, when I'm talking so much about psychology and emotions and things like that, I know people who are so physically disabled, they're like, what? Like, and I was there for so many years. I saw none of this. I saw just my physical symptoms of pain, of very, some I won't talk of, but like, skin rashes, very like obvious things, which like, how can you even begin to say, oh no, that's an emotional response? I now can't really see anything other than this stuff. But that's taken me years to see that. But so if you're right now at like just this purely physical level, like it will come, and you're intrigued by this work, just keep journaling, keep jotting down the moment when something happens, and then track back to what was happening, consciously, and then hopefully more of the sort of unconscious programming will reveal itself. At the root of things, the unconscious really is processing something like 40 million bits of info per second and is responsible for your autonomic nervous system function. And so, as I said before, using this word of this sliver, because it is something like 6%, is your consciousness. Like, I'm aware of this thought. I'm aware that I can sort of modulate my breathing by choice. But most of the stuff happening in your brain, it's your unconscious. And there are many techniques to sort of delve into your unconscious. Quite often now I find it like it's right there. I kind of already know it. I also use dreams. I think that's a really useful tool as well. It's not like so much what's actually happening in the dream, it's the themes, it's the tones and the messaging. I really do believe, even though it is like literally living hell, to go through something like this, it's such a massive opportunity for complete and utter change. And it's going to take time for some. For some, it can be amazingly fast. But, we can really, really change who we are and our lives in a completely transformational, vibrant, joyful, better future by being ill and coming through it and learning so much about ourselves. Not everyone is equal in this illness. Obviously, some of us have a much more intense time with it. But even if you are, someone, because I lived with sort of mild symptoms for years, so I'm not, and it was really annoying and terrible. But I'm not doing that down in any way, and the tools are completely the same. The way that you would work with this illness is completely the same. And so even if it's like wanting to be able to, exercise, you're functional, but you can't really push it exercise wise. It's the symptoms are the key. Exploring the symptoms and looking for the emotion rather than the physicality of the symptom, is a path to unlocking what's really at the root of all this. And so we'll finish by, truly wishing everyone well. and just stick to the basics. Get your toolkit together. Know that it works. Know that you can modulate your nervous system. Know that a lot of stuff you can slightly just, pull away from. You don't need to fully understand what's happening muscularly, spatially. Just know it's a protective mechanism, and we need to rewire that using neuroplasticity. Keep it simple and keep going. And that's the big one. Don't stop. Don't stay stuck. Keep going. And so this is just a very simple list of things that I would maybe use over a half an hour period. So I'll talk you through them. And this would be what I would call, okay, I'm doing a round. And, we might be doing this most of the day. Okay, so the vestibular system, I'll do something on this, but for now, just know that we're using our eyes, and it's to do with, it's an ancient part of the brain to do with whether we know we're up or down, and it will massively help if you're having dizziness. And certainly what I had was not so much, I would have major dizziness, but really just consistent, I would say shakes, where you're just shaking and you don't really know, your body doesn't really know where the center of gravity is, in a sense. And so honestly, vestibular eye exercises are amazing for this. So I would just keep my head and eyes out straight ahead of me, and then I would turn my eyes, keeping my head straight, and find a point on the wall, maybe 3 meters away, and just hold that. And you want the point to be not like a pushing stretch, but not too easy equally. A little bit like how you wouldn't like overstretch a muscle straight away. And you would stay there for about 20 seconds. And you do the other side, head straight, the eyes are moving and finding a point. And you might notice a sort of relief, a breath, and bring your attention into your legs, because sometimes you can, when you start doing this work, you can feel like the muscular system will tighten up. And so that's another 20 seconds, and you can do that back and forth a little bit, and you'll feel maybe you'll yawn. That would be a great sign that the parasympathetic is switching on. And now a bit more of an intense one would be putting your thumb straight ahead of you, out in front of your head. And as we're going to move the thumb to the left and to the right slowly, our eyes are going to follow the thumb as our head twists in the opposite direction very slightly. And so this is a little bit more intense. I think the first time I did this, I did probably six turns, and then I fell asleep for 3 hours. So that really shows, like, if you have reactions like that, like, you really need this, work. And if you're interested in working with someone, find someone who is a functional neurologist would be the term, or a sort of neuromuscular rehab specialist. Or there's quite good information on it on YouTube, as there is for most things that I'm talking about, like faster EFT or whatever it is. You can learn so much for free. And so as I put the vestibular exercises down, we're now going to do some swaying and grounding. And so grounding our energy into our feet, we can make the noise VOO, and we can really make that noise from our belly and kind of send it vibrationally up our central nervous system. And we sway gently from left to right. How can you add to this? I mean, this is when this stuff is really personal. Do you put on a song that really grounds you? And now we could just like move in after a couple of minutes of that into somatic inquiry and coming into symptoms. And so what are we feeling? Maybe our eyes are feeling quite strained. Maybe our breathing is quite labored. Maybe we know that our circulation isn't very good because the blood flow doesn't look quite right. Maybe our fingers are burning. Maybe we have just like a deep anxiety in our chest. We're going to just as we did at the start, we go into the symptom, we describe them, and we stay with them. And we give them permission, just as we would a child, to feel the way we feel. Don't push for any change. That will come later in a sort of more of the brain training part. But for now, we're just going to say you're allowed to feel whatever you need to feel and stay with the sensation. And for as long as you can, stay with it. Now, it may fall away and it may not. And so now, okay, well, I'm going to offer you a different path. I'm going to offer you something new. And by doing that, we give our brain, this somatic world-building visualization. And in our visualization, we are wherever we are. If it's a memory, we go into the textures, the smell, the light. We flood our body as much as possible with this elevation. We're well, we're vibrant, we're healthy, we're the best, our true self who never leaves. We are that person right now in this visualization. And that might be 5 minutes. And then we come back into the somatic body, come back into the sensations. Has anything changed? Has anything shifted? Has anything become lighter? And let's now do some breathing for a couple of minutes. We do the breath where you take a deep breath in. Before letting it out, you do another breath on top. It's quite a simple one. And you're elongating that first breath. And just when you would normally breathe out, you take another breath on top. And it really is quite a soothing thing to do. And remember, you're not breathing kind of, from your throat. You're really doing proper, as you breathe in, your stomach should be pushing out. And so put your hand on your stomach. And we see how we feel. Again, check in back with the sensations, any shifts. And now maybe we do some tapping. That's something that's easy to follow along on YouTube. And I recommend faster EFT over regular EFT. And so maybe nothing's changed. And actually the emotion is there's a lot of fear. Maybe we need to scream. Maybe we need to cry. Maybe we need to just, find some co-regulation with other people, which is such an important part. And either way, we keep going and we keep going until we start to feel shifts. And that would be the work. That is literally the work, the toolkit in action. So I hope that is useful, and good luck. Keep going. Bye.